You're either starting off as a beginner, wanting to edit like your favorite editors, or you're still learning as a beginner, continuing their editing journey. Either way, I'd like to help reveal the path towards making a satisfactory edit. First of all, I'd like to say that rules can be broken with editing as long as you go about it the right way. For example, you don't need Twixtor, you don't need to flow frame everything. If you don't want shakes, you don't really need them. There are a set of rules always thrown down people's throats, which are good to follow, but don't be scared to sway away from it. A very important suggestion to improving is understanding your software, how you would like to use it, and breaking out of limitations when you reach it. There are basic fundamentals, basics that are always talked about to a point where beginners often overlook them, even though they are incredibly important. So to go through the main basics or fundamentals, we have color correction, time remap, movement, pacing, scene selection, effect usage, and other things depending on what sort of style you want to go for. There is also compositing, but that just really depends on what you're doing because not everyone composites. So what we do is we combine all these fundamentals and we call it the execution of your edit. If your execution lacks, that means you are lacking in some of your basics, if not most of your basics. Basics as in fundamentals of your edit. To figure out how to improve on your execution, watching good editors is very important. It's how you learn to understand what a good edit really looks like. Looking back on edits that pique your interest every so often will help you improve. For example, when I was still learning and I would edit a specific scene that similar good editors have done, I would constantly look back on the edits and see how they would execute those ideas. It doesn't have to be completely stealing the entire scene. Stuff like shakes for a specific impact or motion graphics used in a specific way will help you slowly start to understand how execution works. Starting off with CC, color correction, color grading. Now, I'm not the best when it comes to color grading. I usually just put something that saturates the colors, makes it vibrant, which gives off a more happy enjoyment sort of feel to the edits. For long vibe edits that want to portray a story, you may want to use different sort of colors and temperatures of color for different sort of vibes that you want to tell. If you want it to be a more sad, you can use colder tones such as like blues and cyans. For something emotionally warm, it could be an orange tint of color grade. But yeah, color corrections isn't really my thing. I do use it slightly, but again, it's very slight, more so levels and mood lighting and all that stuff. But I will link tutorials in the note to the folder. I will have tutorials linked in which you can follow them. This video is more so just a guide of the thought processes behind each basics and how you should go about utilizing your basics. Now we're on time remap, and with time remap it's quite complicated to explain, even though time remap should technically be considered easy because there's so many tutorials on time remap. But to explain what time remap is, if you don't know, time remap is basically velocity. You can speed up, slow down a clip or a series of clips, depends what you would want to do with your edits. Now, using time remap is very essential if you want your clip to sync well with your song. Now, most of the time when it comes to time remap, it is best to actually interpolate your clips. To explain what interpolation is basically between frames, it adds on an extra frame using AI or just auto-generated, computer-generated frames. And for the reason for this is because when you want to increase your clip duration with time remap, you need to have more frames in there so it's not choppy and, you know, stiff looking. You need it to look smooth. Now, there are many ways you can interpolate your clips. The most basic and the most used one is floor frames. Obviously I'll leave a link for tutorials on that and on how to use it. Now here comes the complicated issue with time remap that people tend to do a lot and mess up with. The way that time remap works and the way that interpolation works, in specific with anime, but it can also happen to shows and movies or whatever, is that when there's a huge difference in frames, the AI that tries to generate an in-between frame messes up and creates warps. And the reason for this is because there's too much of a difference in between frame 1 and the last frame, that the AI doesn't know what to do and doesn't know how to generate it perfectly. So what it ends up doing is it ends up warping the frame to make it look as smooth as possible, but you end up just getting a pile of mess for that frame. The workaround for this is simply to not interpolate those frames. If you want to interpolate the whole clip, that's fine, but it's best not to use that warped frame in your edit. So either you can time remap it in a way where that warp isn't really showing, or completely just get rid of the time remap and leave your dead frames and your normal anime clip running, and then only time remap the part that has frames that are next to each other and where the interpolation is smooth. Now with movement. This is a general fundamental that can be applied to many things with editing. Depending on what you're doing, not having good or fitting movement can really kill your edit. You have to look at movement as a real life thing. How would something interact in real life? For example, understanding how to apply a fitting shake to a clip all depends on the clip itself. The direction of the clip, the impact of the clip, the speed, etc. Same with camera movement. We could also be talking about movement with assets, text, elements, etc. Squash and stretch is very important with most animations. Movement is a huge thing to look out for when watching good editors' edits. It'll help you improve massively once you start to understand how good movement looks like. Now with pacing. Pacing is something I've come to realize in the last year about how important it really is. Having a constant pace throughout your edit is something a lot of editors do, and it keeps it boring and repetitive. You need to pace your edit with the feeling of the song. For example, in my Cologne edits, I pace the edit to the drums and how dramatic the drums get. It starts off slow, then the pacing during the middle is pretty average, and then near the end, as the tension builds up, the pacing gets faster and then comes to a sudden stop, which is the conclusion. It's not about matching the clips to the beats. You need to feel the song and pace it with the feeling of it. Pacing your edit is also quite fun to do, and not sticking to just beats. I find that pretty boring. Laying out your edit, laying out your clips to the feeling of the song is so much more fun. But anyway, enough of pacing. To link it with the next thing we'll be talking about, which is scene selection. Scene selection is just as important for what you want to make. If you're trying to portray a story, then scene selection is arguably the most important thing you should be spending your time on. Use your scenes to your advantage. Try looking for scenes that aren't so heavily used, and if they are, put your own spin on it. Remember, the composition is your playground. Pick scenes that fit within your edit and play with it. Make sure it makes sense to you and to the viewers, and most importantly, enjoy the process. Next up is effect usage, which can also link in with compositing. Unfortunately, a lot of effects are gatekept by editors, and the reason for this is because a lot of effects become really overused, and realistically no one wants that. Use effects correctly and when needed. Don't add useless effects for no reason. This is something beginners end up falling into. They use every effect and overlay under the sun. Over editing is not good. There's a lot of tutorials for every type of effect, so I'm not going to go through every effect, but yeah, just don't over edit your effects. And that's it for the beginner's guide. I hope this has helped. I will also link some editors that you could watch if you have a hard time finding some. And yeah, thank you for watching.